Welcome all this evening. I am going to share with you this old paper called The Double, which to my knowledge is the first ever accepted by any Jungian forum from an out homosexual writer. I thought it would be a good idea to do this in this public format, this public event, in honor of Doug and Ali's new group, which just coincidentally happens to be getting into particulars of paper aspects of the theme that are discussed in the paper and being developed some in the group, which is interesting and curious. So I thought it would be really interesting then to actually have a little event here in one of our club meetings, coincident with that new group event, which meets once a month, there where I would just plunk myself down here and read the paper. That's not a thing that commonly happens, and here since we always videotape the event, this would give an opportunity to also have a record, a video record of the author reading the paper. And that has some historical merit for the reason I just mentioned to you. It may not be relevant or not to whoever that this particular paper here, I have a reprint of it from the original that was sent to me along with the volume of the issue. And I have it here. I noticed that when I pulled it out of my files, it was folded and actually had been unstapled several times. So I suspect it's been copied, and probably even because the way the pages are folded within when it was stapled, I suspect I've actually read it before. I thought earlier I'd not actually read this thing publicly before, but it must be in the midst of distant time that perhaps had happened, because it has that quality to it. I bet I've taken this out and read it in other public venues at some point, but it's so hazy now, so way in the past, that I don't even remember that. I'm pulling this out to refresh my memory for tonight's event, and then I decided I would like to read it from this particular version of it. I just went, oh, look at that. That's obviously been thumbed through before like that. And isn't that curious? So anyway, I thought, here so long after the composition of this little paper, to read it now, 35 years later, when if you looked at the little flyer that was written up for tonight's event, in 1976, when this paper was accepted by the journal Spring for publication, was only 7 years after Stonewall. The Briggs Initiative, if any of you ever heard of that, had not even come on the political scene in California, which was this initiative to ban gay teachers from the public schools. And not only gay teachers, but anyone sympathizing. Any teacher sympathizing in the classroom with gay teachers would be banned from the public schools. A nasty man named Briggs was pushing it. That was later even than that. So then this paper. So one might imagine, if any of you were around at that time, what the atmosphere might have been like, generally speaking, or publicly speaking, around such an atmosphere as homosexuality. When I submitted this paper to the folks at Spring, and I picked Spring because they were known as rather more liberal at this time. Spring was at least covertly headed by James Hillman. I don't know if any of you know the insides of the Jungian psychological politics. Certainly in past decades is very obscure, but he was seen at the time as somewhat of a rebel and not completely, in this kind of silly technical way, renounced Jungian psychology for something he calls archetypal psychology, as if that's different. The subtitle of Spring is an annual of archetypal psychology. That's the subtitle from the beginning. And there's nothing not Jungian about that journal. It's a very classical Jungian journal. So, but nonetheless, under his purview at that time, I felt that Jungian journal in particular would be more open to this sort of idea, that meaning a homosexual view of homosexual love. And it might sound pretty simple now, such an idea, a homosexual view of homosexual love. But believe it or not to mention a mere 35 years ago, but certainly even earlier than that, people would go, huh? I kid you not. The common social atmosphere would have been blank at best, all the way from blank to offended by the idea, especially if one was required to think through that idea. You know, what would it mean to have a homosexual view of homosexual love? To actually think that through, that idea. What does that mean? My God, I'd have to then respect it. I'd have to see it from its point of view. Horror of horrors, that would validate it. You can't do that. So that's all, the thing that beyond Christian naming, they used to say, you don't even think it. You don't even think about it. So all these things are beyond the pale, all that kind of stuff. So I knew when I first formulated this idea, which was on account of my school, and for my master's thesis, had rejected my master's thesis 3/4 finished. Perhaps even a little more than 3/4 finished, because as it was coming together, you see each piece of it, it was coming together, they were more and more offended by its overt homosexuality, its promotion of overt homosexuality, and they couldn't take it eventually, they went bonkers, and they rejected it, and I had to write an entire new thesis within 3 months if I wanted to graduate. And this is what had come to me through actually a visionary experience that I've shared in other contexts, this kind of idea or notion, and I knew when it came to me as an alternate way to formulate a thesis for my master's thesis, actual written result of this new formulation, that I would be very interested in doing more with it than simply it being a master's thesis as an idea. This struck me as way beyond that level, as proposing an idea. In fact, it would be very necessary to then boil it, at least that aspect, this notion of the double, out of the master's thesis into a realistic paper. So to be submitted then to a reputable Jungian journal, since it's in Jungian theory. So the question then arose, okay, you guys will find this interesting, the question then arose how to do that. Because at this point in my life, okay, I did not even yet have a master's degree. I had no training in Jungian psychology in any way, shape, or form. In fact, I had no exposure to Jungian psychology except an obscure undergraduate class at UC for a quarter. They were in the quarter system back then. That's all I knew about it. I knew nothing about it. Absolutely nothing about it. Okay? So in fact, I was trying to, it was like an intuition came to me that if I wish to understand this otherwise very esoteric, subjective, spiritual encounter or initiatory experience I had, intellectually speaking, in some kind of intellectual tradition I could research and find out about it, would be Jung's thought, Jung's psychology. So I went to the school where I was at, had a big library, and then it was the collected works of Jung, and I plonked myself down there in front of that section of the stacks and the books, and I just started to pull out his collected works and look at them and read them all and see how he talked about love and what he thought it was romantic. I mean, it's more technically not genitally organized romantic sexual love, but as formulated in adult experience, not as a child level, but as developing out of that originally, that kind of sensibility. But as Jung saw it, not as Freud saw it, and I saw right away, in doing that Jung is very much at least trying to give a face to this Jungian analytic legitimization of heterosexual forms of love. Well, where was that for me? Now, as you know, if any of you followed the traditional Jungian thought on matters of homosexuality, that then led to supposed thinkers on homosexuality, who again not ever thinking from the point of view of homosexuality, to now want to think of that homosexuality as somehow a strange subsidiary variant or twisting of heterosexual things or themes or topics or ways of looking at things, most particularly ways of looking at things. So if that's what homosexuality was, some bad way of looking at or from a heterosexual point of view. It's mind-boggling. So I'm looking into this literature, and it's like in terms of trying to apply it to my own visionary personal experience, didn't make sense. But I didn't, at the same time in reading Jung, of course, if any of you actually read any Jung, even in the English translation, because I don't know the German, at least not enough to really read it or anything, in a serious sense, it's a very fascinating stuff, extremely fascinating. I found it very clear to me. People vary in their reactions to Jung, because he's writes in odd and funny ways often. But I found it very clear and simple, so I had no trouble with this level of grasping his ideas, okay, and these ideas of the shadow and the anima and the self and the aspects of individuation, all that. I could grasp them and see them applied in various of his discussions, whether it's his discussions of historical phenomena, his discussions of client material, his discussions of paintings, or of coincidences, or people's fancies of flying saucers. He wrote about all kinds of Bible commentaries, do all kinds of different kinds of things, but over and over he had all common themes and similar themes. And a lot of it seemed really centered around notions of love, ultimately one way or another. But I was not satisfied with this traditional sense. You know, I'm trying to read interpretations of Jung, and followers of Jung would write all kinds of books and describing what these Jungian ideas were, and describing them in lots of different ways, and examples, and other words for the same things, and all that. But I still couldn't, for some reason, I couldn't, just on my own. I was not relying on anyone else in this pursuit of this understanding. It was all my little individual self in the stupid library on my single butt sitting there in the stacks. Okay, of parsing this all out in my head, basically, as I was reading through stuff, all on my own to figure this out. That these ideas were not working, and that if I just applied the traditional ideas, and I wasn't satisfied to do that like the older sub-thinkers were then on homosexual topics, to just look at it in subsidiary terms of what always was available. But right away, if I reference this kind of fantastical imaginary experience I had, the figure which came to me in that experience struck me as of this kind of quality of like, I don't know, was then I needed a word for what that represented. That was like, for example, the word that gets translated or used by Jung, anima. Why did Jung call this figure that had this effect on him anima? Because it animates something in him to encounter this figure where the quality of the animation is itself like a person. Imagine that. And being by a person is something with great profundity, depth, and potential and possibility, especially in relatedness. Again, not to the object or figure that's provoking this stimulation. I'm talking about the stimulation itself, the excitement itself, the turn on itself. Not the whatever caused the turn on. So if I'm having that same experience, but now in the light of this kind of little bit of a visionary image that came to me, that there's a figure connected, a male figure, well, it doesn't feel like a shadow, like in the traditional Jungian words. No. So that's when this notion of something that's equal to me, it's roughly like what Harry Hay would have been talking about. I didn't know Harry. I didn't know anything. This is all from before Harry, before I knew Harry. It's what I'm talking about. This is an archetypal sensibility. What is this about the love of sayings that have this magical attraction? So it's the sayings that's something more than the sayings. There's the sayings that through the sayings is a doorway to what? Well, here we get into this fascinating discovery of what that could be articulated. And boom, like it popped into my head, double. Call it the double. Double of what? Double coupons? Double dealing? Double turnings? I don't know what double. Already you see it has a funny quality. This is what I'm aiming for. Twin is much more plain, the word twin. But double is if you look it up in the dictionary, which I do later on for my dissertation, I looked the word up in the dictionary and the roots of the word double and so on and so forth. So and cognate words and so on and so forth. So even that level gets developed very interesting thing. So then the idea was how to build up the discussion of this formulation of the idea in parallel with Jung's traditional idea of the anima in a way that would be then submittable to a proper Jungian journal. So I realized there that the task was to compose it in such a way that I would sound like a real legitimate Jungian. I had no legitimate Jungianism whatsoever in me. Absolutely nothing. But that was the task, okay, just to let you know. That was set. So, and the hypothesis was, if they were up to snuff with what they claim to be, you speak as one of them, they have to take it, and when you say means something in their language, they have to take it in, they can't keep it out. They have to take it in. And so that was the task. I'm going to share with you this result, because it's so interesting to look at it in that way.